Hello everyone, I'm Saket Bansal back again with another episode of PMP Exam Prep Power Hour. This time we are running this episode 30 and I'm talking about doing scope management using predictive life cycle. We have been talking about adaptive life cycle and related topic from last 4 or 5 episodes. So I got a feedback that why don't we talk about some of the documents, some of the artifacts we create in a predictive life cycle. So I thought that was a bigger suggestion. So I picked up the first knowledge management or a first area to focus on, and that is a scope management. So in this session, I will talk about some of the critical element of scope management using predictive life cycle. We can take your queries related to scope management topic or beyond. Anything which is related to PMP is good conversation to have in this session. Yes, we can have other project management related conversations as well. If you feel I can help in answering some of your queries, then do post it. But basically, I want to hang around project management, and today pay primarily towards predictive lifecycle project management. So starting with overview of scope management. So in general, the scope management or project scope is a foundational project management topic when we are thinking about predictive life cycle. Because based on requirement, we create scope, and based on scope, we focus on project schedule, and then we drive the cost. So it becomes like a foundation on which our rest of the planning is built upon. So we will learn how do we move from requirement till identification of a deliverable and then baselining the project scope statement. So let's get started. Now, whenever we talk about predictive life cycle, we talk about scope, risk, or anything, we need to do first agreement on how do we do our work. So say rather than directly jumping to requirements and talking about scope, if I'm working on a new project with set of stakeholders, I want to have an agreement about how should we talk about requirement, what all document we should prepare, how frequently we should prioritize the requirement, who are the decision maker, what all categories we want to follow. And similarly, I also focus on scope related planning, talking about what should be the template for scope management or scope document, how detailed we should go in our work breakdown structure, what kind of other stakeholders or prioritization process we should apply when we are focusing on scope. How are we going to control scope as we go in the project execution? So I need to start with creating a plan for my work. In our scope management topic, we create two plans. We prepare something called requirement management plan, and then we prepare something called project scope management plan, or you can just call it scope management plan. The requirement management plan gives us an approach about managing, tracking, identifying, prioritizing, and doing all the things which are related to requirements. Similarly, the scope management plan help us in understanding how are we going to discover scope, control scope, deliver scope, validate scope, and manage changes in the scope. So these management plans are usually approach oriented only. Now, some of you may think that I have been doing project management for a while and we never prepared these kind of documents, requirement management plan or scope management plan. Looks like the PMI is making me prepare unnecessary document. So from a project management perspective, these documents can be an informal agreement also. You may not have these documents. But what is needed is that you need to have an agreement on how are we going to work on requirements and how are we going to work on scope. If you have been doing repetitively similar kind of projects with similar set of stakeholder, you may have an existing understanding as your organization process has set, and you may follow that. And maybe you don't explicitly talk about these management plan, which is perfectly okay. But if in the exam you see that there are many stakeholders and they are confused about the approach of managing requirement and managing scope, then you will say, oh, looks like I need to have an agreement on requirement management plan and scope management plan. Usually as a project manager, I will just take it from my organization process set, my PMO will give me. I may have to do some tailoring on it depending upon my project context. I have an agreement with them. I take an agreement with the stakeholder and says, okay, this is how we are going to work on requirement and scope. So this is something I create as a first artifact in my predictive life cycle, requirement management plan and scope management plan. Usually they are two separate artifacts because set of stakeholders are different, but you create these two to start with. Now you have this. Now you start focusing on identifying requirement. Now, before you identify requirement, and we talk about identifying requirement, we should be a little bit spending time and clarifying the difference between scope and requirement. Many a time they look pretty much interchangeable, but from project management perspective, we need to understand the difference. The requirement is owned by stakeholders. The scope is owned by solutioning team. So requirement is they are driven from the needs, problems, expectations of the stakeholders, and based on those needs and expectation, we are trying to figure it out what kind of capability, what kind of features they want to see in the end product. So it is something that I need this, I need this, I need this, and this kind of capability should be there in the solution which you provide, is something coming as a requirement. Say I want to create a house. So probably my stakeholder will tell me that they need a room size of this much big. They probably need these many floors. They probably have an easy access to the various rooms. They may want to have an elevator at various things. They may want to have a fire safety. So they talk about what all they need in the house, and these all are requirements. So how should be able to provide these many rooms, these kind of accessibility, these kind of layouts at a high level expectations and needs from that house they are sharing with us, and we will put them into requirements. So we can keep writing that, okay, you need these many rooms. Now you understand, when you have these all requirements, you start working on documenting it. And that is where we focus on requirement exploration. But somebody will say, before you go to requirement exploration, then tell us what is the scope. So after collecting all these requirements, I need to define the layout of the house. I probably will talk about how this is how we will design your first floor, this is how we will design your second floor, and this is how you can access various rooms. And then we will probably show that, see, our house design takes care of your all requirements. So we start from a requirement, then we apply our solutioning mind, we involve subject matter experts, we create the design of the deliverables, we design the specifications of the deliverable, and we map requirement with the scope. Yeah? And the team will work on a scope directly. Indirectly working on the scope will also take care of the requirements. So we can say requirement gives us a trigger for the scope, and scope is something which is designed by our subject matter experts to find out how are we going to satisfy the requirements. Now, somebody will say, how do you discover requirement? So there is no one technique. If you go through PMP topics or Pinbox 6 topics, you will learn about various techniques, like you can conduct interview, you can go for observation, you can ask stakeholder to fill a survey form, you can study the existing documents where they might have clarified their expectations. Maybe you have a contract which has a statement of work. You may start from there. You can probably do a brainstorming activity with your stakeholders. So it all depends upon the type of work you are doing. Now, for a PMP exam perspective, don't assume that you will have a contract all the time and contract contains all the requirements in very detailed manner. Some of you might be working on those kind of projects where your contracts are pretty elaborated. Yeah. So that's a one situation, but there could be another situation where your requirements are just initially when you are starting your project charter, the high level requirements are just one paragraph, and you need to discover the detailed requirement as a part of your planning or a requirement exploration process. So as a project manager, after doing proper kickoff, after having overall understanding of project charter, one of the critical activity we will start in the initial stages of our project is requirement discovery, requirement exploration. Many times in our Pinbox 6, we call this process collect requirement. But usually in our project management work, we don't like the word collect requirement because it gives a little sense that requirements were just lying and we just need to collect them and compile them. But we need to understand, we need to explore requirements. We need to do requirement exploration where we need to discover them. They are not just readily available. Sometimes they are hidden in the minds of the stakeholders. Sometimes they are few level deep into the documents. We need to discover it. Now, as a project manager, usually it makes sense to provide categorization to these requirements as well. You may have compliance requirements separately. You may have a process requirement separately. You may have some set of documentation and transitioning requirements separately, like when you are doing support, these kind of things should be provided. And you will definitely have a product or a deliverable specification related deliverable specific requirements separately. So depending upon the context, I usually work with my PMO or a group, and they will provide me some kind of guidance of categorization, which will help me in discovering the requirement appropriately. So depending upon the context, I may apply techniques like benchmarking, interviews, surveys, brainstorming, document analysis, learning from previous projects and extending it further. All those are possible options. And after that, I will come up with the list of requirements. You can visualize it as a Excel sheet which has some requirement ID, some requirements are written. You may have a requirement source. You may have a person who has explained this requirement to you. You may point it out. You may have a categorization done, and you may have later on the prioritization and status. All those things may also start coming, but you come up with a list of requirement. Many a time you may also have a problem where set of stakeholders are giving conflicting requirement to you. So as a project manager working with a business analyst, you will have another challenging activity where you need to make stakeholder agree to the requirement, stakeholder agree to the prioritization of the requirement. That will be some set of work you will do in the initial stage of your project. Now, once your requirements are done, then you start moving towards solutioning part. Yeah. So that something is here. I hope I'm audible. I just saw the message that I'm not able to connect. Yeah, so probably this is not about the audio. Yeah, it is maybe about something else. Yeah. Okay, let me check it myself if it is. Okay, I got it. So LinkedIn is giving. Yeah, now I can see it. Yeah, so I think it was an initial issue where LinkedIn was giving some trouble, and I think it is working well now. Okay, I move forward. Great, thank you. So I hope things are working now. Requirement exploration. Now, after requirements are done, we start working on scope. So say the scoping is done with the help of involving subject matter experts. So if I'm constructing a house, I'm a user of house. I probably an owner of the house and I'm giving outsource contract to build my house. But I can't tell exactly how we should design the floors, how we should put the foundation and other things, where we should put a bigger room, where we put a smaller room, how we should meet the earthquake compliance requirement, how should we meet a fire safety compliance requirement. I probably won't be able to tell all this. I am a user of the house. I am just telling how many rooms I need, how many open space I need, and I need an access and all those things. So those all I gave in the requirement. Now somebody looks at the requirement and they start analyzing what is possible. They probably also ask me how much money you are willing to put into it. So it is just not blindly looking at a requirement and getting converted into scope. So requirement might be converted into a scope in multiple ways. There could be multiple alternatives. Some alternative could be cheap, some alternative could be expensive, some alternative could be compromising your requirement, but we need to find it out. So the project group, now the project group plays a critical role involving some probable consultant and subject matter experts. They will analyze these requirements. They will take references from existing products. They do alternative analysis. They may do a benchmarking of existing solution, which might be taking care of some of these requirement problem. Maybe they look into some other house which is nearby, something like that. They may look at what kind of houses has been approved by the nearby authority, maybe like that. And by doing all this, they come up with the design of the deliverables. So they may design 1, 2, 3 deliverable and says, this is something which will be able to satisfy your requirement. But they need to define that particular deliverable in more a deliverable manner. So say, I don't say that we will have a 4 rooms. I need to tell that this will be a ground floor and this is how these rooms will be set up. I may create a blueprint of it. This will be entrance and this is how it will operate. So I need to design that blueprint. And I will show that blueprint and say this is meeting your requirement. So I'm coming up with the solution specifications, and these solution specifications should be understandable by my development team later on, or the project team, that is in their language. And this is something will help us in meeting the requirement. So when I prepare a project scope statement, this is something I am doing. I am working with my expert stakeholders to come up with the detailed specifications of various deliverables. One of the key which we can keep in mind from a PMP exam perspective, the details of the deliverables, the characteristics of the deliverables are defined in a project scope statement. So based on requirement, we came up with the project scope statement. Now somebody will say, is it necessary to meet all 100% requirement in a scope statement? May not be. So you may have a 20 requirements and you will say all these 20 will not be taken care, only 15s can be taken care because remaining 5s are either not feasible or very expensive. So we probably need to decide that's not part of our initial understanding. So there could be some requirements which may need to defer, which may be not feasible, but we capture them in a requirement document. But now we are going in a scope and we see the feasibility, alternative, and costing, and all high level aspects of it. And then we create a design for our project scope, and that is called project scope statement. You can visualize it like a 100-page document which talks about the whole deliverables and their details related to it. That is something you create as a project scope statement. Now you may start wondering that what if this scope statement talks about something, but stakeholder gave us a requirement and they two are not matching well with each other. There are some requirements unknowingly missed, yeah, something like that. Purposefully, you can definitely defer because they are not becoming feasible, but they got missed because of mistakes. Or later on, when you are delivering your deliverable, some stakeholder will just keep asking, this was my requirement, where is my requirement is getting solved. So as a project manager, I want to have a tracking sheet, or you can say a mapping sheet, between what are the requirements and what are the deliverables, and later on, how do we validate those deliverables, take sign off on them. There could be more columns to it. But this is something I want to ensure, and this sheet will be called requirement traceability matrix. So in a simple word, I trace the requirement till its end. Yeah. So I say this was a requirement, and we have a first floor having this particular design. The first floor design takes care of these many rooms requirements. So I say first floor, and I may talk about those particular details. So this is something which may need to be tracked further, because when we are taking sign off, we also take sign off based on those requirements and various deliverables and various other elements in future. And this is called requirement traceability matrix. Now, sometimes our people who are not coming from software background usually get confused, because in software it is usually used terminology just to make sure that mapping is maintained well, and that is called requirement traceability matrix. And you use it when you are doing scope validation. So for example, once your house is completed and you are going for sign off, then you will show your deliverable, but stakeholder will also say, show me something which I gave to you, not something which you gave to me as a scope statement. Then I will bring my requirement document in front of them and say, this is all we agreed to, and this is what you said to me. And then I will open up a requirement traceability matrix and say, okay, these requirements are getting mapped to these deliverables. So I tick, 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 and I show it to him and says, okay, this is what we are done. Can you accept this particular deliverable? So requirement traceability matrix, during the execution, I maintain it to make sure that we are on track and we are really tracking our requirement till execution. And when we are taking acceptance of our deliverable from our stakeholders, we use it very extensively. So that is something requirement traceability matrix. In the PMP exam, you use it for tracing the requirement. So that's a little important keyword you need to keep in mind. So we got a project scope statement, we got a traceability matrix. Now what do we do next? Yeah. Few more minutes, 4 or 5, before we close the requirements. Now you hear something called work breakdown structure. Now somebody will say, why do we have this work breakdown structure? So say you have a 100-page scope statement, and there are different units, different subgroups in your project, or different team members who might work in different area. So somebody is working on plumbing, if we are taking a house example, somebody is working on electric connection, somebody is working on procurement, somebody is working on design and construction of the house. There are different teams who are working in these areas. First, I may not want to share the whole 100-page document with all of them. Second, because of security and compliance reasons, they probably not expect you to have the whole perspective, maybe in detail. The second, even if I share, they will get confused. They want to know their part of the work. And I will also remain confused because I am unable to track what is done and what is not done. So in our project management, what we do, we create a hierarchical diagram. So level 1, level 2, level 3, and we keep like an organization chart you see. So that's a hierarchical diagram we prepare. And this hierarchical diagram decomposes or breaks down the project scope statement into manageable chunks. And that is the purpose of work breakdown structure. So we can say we are breaking down the whole work into small pieces so they become consumable. I usually give a metaphoric example of that. You want to eat a watermelon, a big watermelon. So you can't eat it the whole. What you need to do, you need to divide. You need to make small pieces, and then only you can consume it. Similarly, your whole project scope statement is like a big watermelon, and you need to create half of it, and then you create further of it, slice of it, and you start consuming. It is also possible that you may not divide the whole watermelon in a one go. You will probably say, okay, I want to create half. First I want to finish half, and then I will create the remaining half. So that's possible. So you can do a progressive splitting of work breakdown structure. That is also possible in our predictive life cycle, and we use a term called progressive elaboration for that. So we create the work breakdown structure. Now there are some tricky rules. In our project management space, we say that the work breakdown structure should contain 100% of your project work. So the other activities like quality activities, risk management activities, and project monitoring activities, those all should be also visible in a work breakdown structure. It is just not about the project scope. There are other type of work which you are doing in the project, process related work, documentation related work, those also should be visible or should be tagged in the work breakdown structure. So that is something we need to keep in mind. Now there are further details. That leaf element of work breakdown structure is called work package, and there is something called planning package. You can gradually get into those details if you study those particular topic in detail, but that's the overall understanding called work breakdown structure. Now, each element of this work breakdown structure, because the whole purpose of creating work breakdown structure was that I don't want to give a 100-page document to my teams and confuse them. So for a specific area where my team is working, I want to give them that specific scope. Yeah. And that I create as a dictionary of each element of WBS, and we use a term called WBS Dictionary. In my understanding or my uses, I usually don't see a terminology WBS Dictionary is frequently used in a real life project in my limited experience. But you can understand anything which gives me a detailing of those small items in detail is equivalent to my WBS Dictionary. Like in a software word, that could be a use cases, that could be a module description if you are following predictive life cycle, or there could be something else in your word. You may use other languages, but from a project management generic language perspective, we say that anything which is explaining the element of WBS in an understandable manner, so that depending that particular team can execute that work, we will call it WBS Dictionary, work breakdown structure dictionary. So you reach to a WBS and you reach to a WBS Dictionary. So what do you have? You have a project scope statement, you have a WBS, and you have a WBS Dictionary. Now you take all these things and go for approval. You can say, can we get an approval of this understanding of a scope? And once the designated stakeholder agrees to it, they say, okay, this looks good, I think we can go with it. We call it baseline. Yeah. So in our project management world, in a predictive life cycle project management world, the baseline is very critical topic. So baseline is something which is an approved version. Now, can we change the element which is baseline later? Definitely yes, by following some appropriate agreement with our stakeholder. Change can happen at any point in time for any area of our project. Nothing is frozen, but it has to be tracked. So we can say when I have a signed off version, even if I'm changing, I will probably see what was the signed off and what was the change, and probably we have a better comparison and tracking and variance analysis for that. So after having this scope statement prepared and work breakdown structure prepared and WBS Dictionary prepared, I probably as a project manager may go for a walkthrough. We may show and explain all these details to our key stakeholders who can understand this particular thing. We show how the various elements of WBSs are mapped to requirements. So probably in a baselining meeting, I also show requirement traceability matrix. I show requirement traceability matrix, and my scope statement and my WBS tracking, and I probably make a mapping sheet, present to them in the form of requirement traceability matrix. And after doing the brainstorming, explanation, clarifying their questions, I take a sign off on my project scope statement, and that is called scope baseline. And this scope baseline will work as a foundation for my rest of planning activities, be it project schedule planning and project cost planning. Now, sometimes we think that we freeze the scope and then we start working on project schedule and then we start working on project costing. It can be, but not necessary. And usually it is not like that, because the scope, schedule, and cost are very interconnected. I may want to have a lot of things, but when I realize it is going to take a lot of time and money, probably I want to change my mind. So it is better to have an understanding, maybe not very refined understanding, but along with scope presentation, as a project manager, we usually do a presentation of project schedule as well, at least high level. And then high level project costing estimates, revised costing estimate also should be shared, because these two things can trigger your scope change as well. Usually The baselinings of scope, schedule, and cost happens in a one go, because till the time these three are not understood well interconnectedly, freezing one may create more trouble for a project manager rather than help. Yeah, so that's something we can say in the form of predictive life cycle. I think this much is good introduction. That's what I assume. But if you have some queries related to this topic or any other topic of PMP, yeah, we can talk, or a project management here. I'm just checking if the link and other things are working. So I see now finally the LinkedIn is working. It was initially not working. That's what I could see. Yes. Okay. If all is good, then I can introduce something further, probably. Okay, in the meantime, you are probably typing your questions. So, okay, there is a question. Yeah, probably we can start with that. As a new PM, how should I start, or what is my first step? So, new PM for a new project. Yeah, so we are assuming that you are starting a project. So, your first week will go into understanding the high level requirement of the project. Probably you will go and meet the stakeholders as a first thing. You may do study of all the documents which you have, depending upon what is your source document. So in our PMP exam perspective, we may have a strategic projects which are coming from business case side. So you probably want to understand business case and benefit management plan before you do anything else. If you are doing contract driven projects, so your organization may have proposed a proposal, you may have a detail of your RFP responses, you have a contract details, you probably understand that. And that all information will be attached with your project charter. So if I have been assigned into a project, I will say, okay, can you share me a directory where all these information are available? That should I will be doing. And then I will pick up from that directory who are the key stakeholder who should I speak to. So I start meeting them and try to understand high level expectation and requirement related to that particular project. And then I probably look into historical data and try to create high level understanding of that particular project, which will help me in initiating something called project kickoff meeting. So I will work with my stakeholders, I will understand it, we will summarize few requirements, few understanding, we will agree on the approach, we will agree on, do we want to follow agile, do we want to follow a hybrid, do we want to follow predictive, we will do evaluation of project lifecycle selection. Then we need to see if we have an already allocated team, then I probably make the team do some ice breaking activities, have some agreement on the working agreements. So I may do those activities. And then after having some understanding of how do we operate and work here, what is the overall understanding of stakeholder, I may want to formally ensure that all of us are looking at a common problem together. And most likely your organization will say that run a project kickoff meeting. So I will I will initiate a project kickoff meeting. And after that, yeah, so once that project kickoff meeting should ensure at a high level, objective level, people, stakeholder teams are clear about project objectives. Good set of stakeholders were identified, and we have a common understanding. The people who are funding the project has clarified what is their expectation from this project. And after having those information as per life cycle selection, we start with the requirement work. If it's a predictive life cycle, then definitely I get into requirement gathering activities or requirement exploration activities as a second step from a second week onwards. If it's an adaptive life cycle, then also we may do a brainstorming session to come up with the high level product backlog. And then we create an initial set of environment to start sprinting, and we start sprinting afterwards. Yeah, so that's how, from a PMP perspective, we can see definitely each organization will have their own context and some recommended steps, but this is how we can probably start with a new project. So first step could be study the project charter. Yeah, that could be, yeah, or yeah, something like that. Yes. Okay, so I'm just seeing if we have anything in LinkedIn. No, not yet. Okay, yeah. What I'm starting is, this is something we are starting from next week. Yeah, maybe. The first session will happen somewhere on 25th June Indian timing morning. So we are starting a focused topics sessions. So say we pick up agile related topics. Our first one is just understanding of what is agile, and then we focus on managing requirement estimation. So we have a published schedule, and each session will last for 3.5 hours. We call it focused learning sessions, one go. But it's an interactive one. It's like we all come into a one Zoom call and we discuss about a particular topic. And this is something is available in our on our website. We are keeping it very low in price. It's like for India, it's like 1,500 per session, or for if you are in outside India, then it's a $20 per session, 1,500 plus GST. So some of you who are preparing for project management and may not be ready for taking the full PMP course yet, or might have taken some PMP course but still wondering about some of these topics, yeah, depending upon your choice of topic, you may consider checking our website and enrolling to those particular programs. So it's a simple bite-sized learning work breakdown structure. So PMP looks like a big WBS element. So what we decided that create a drill down of it and create a small packages, and that is how we take it here. So there is a question, can a project scope statement be an input to a project charter? A PMI mock answer supports it. So please don't worry about mock answers. There are wrong mock answers also. You can take the same question and go to PMI's Infinity, the chat GPT version, and the GPT will correct the answer also if you challenge that particular answer. So don't worry about that. Let's just focus on, can there be a project scope statement input to a project charter? That could be the simple question rather than whatever mock is saying. And we need to see the context of the mock. So from a same project scope statement, definitely not. Yeah. So you have a project charter. After that, you do planning of the requirement and scoping. Then you go for requirement. Then you reach to a project scope statement. So it's a little far, yeah, a little far from there. But you may have a statement of work as an input to project charter. Maybe you are doing as a contract driven project, and in a contract you may have a detailed explanation of that information. So in those cases there is a possibility, but we probably won't call that particular content as a project scope statement. It may look like a project scope statement, which means it might be very detailed in some cases, but usually we call it statement of work or some project contract details. Yeah, so that's a wording we need to see. But there is a possibility sometime we get a very detailed requirement and scope agreed in a contract itself, and that may just start our process quickly as a project charter. Yeah. But please do not worry about these input output questions. They will not come in the PMP exam. Yeah, they will not. And you don't have to worry about all these big process related terminology. They will just delay your PMP exam. Yeah. Just focus on exam content outline. Even if the PMI study hall questions, you can see the reviews and all, they are pretty much extra. They are not like the one which will come in the PMP exam. Yeah. So you probably can do some exploration. Okay. So how does procurement impacts influence scope? So say from a PMP exam perspective, what is procurement? So you have your scope statement, you have created work breakdown structure. Now you had three elements and then further elements got divided, but one branch of your WBS, you believe better to be outsourced, better to get done from somewhere outside. So what you do, you go to a vendor and try to explain that particular requirement and scope to them. So that way, yeah, your project scope statement and further WBS, more specifically WBS and WBS Dictionary, the specific section of that particular area which you are procuring will result into procurement statement of work. So now you want to give a contract or request for proposal to someone, and you will put this project scope statement detail from your project in that request for proposal, which will later on get agreed in the contract statement. Yeah, so that's how your scope goes into somebody else's project there. And that's why I was telling, sometimes your contracts, you can think that that vendor is me. Maybe in that case, I am getting somebody's WBS here in a way. So yes, some contract could be very elaborated and they may have those details, but in a simple word, we can say the project scope statement is an input to procurement statement of work. When you do procurement planning, this is something goes as an input, and output of procurement planning is procurement statement of work. Yeah. Okay. So hanging around scope and scope related topics, I think we have been talking. Many a time people do also have a little confusion. I have not made the banner out of it, but let's make it now. Something called scope creep, and something is called also called gold plating. Yeah. So many a time we also face this problem. So say scope creep, what it is, and is there any change is scope creep? Anything I want to change in my project? It is not. See, in our predictive life cycle also, whenever we have a new discovery, we need to respond to it. Yes, the discovery will be expensive, but not responding to it is also expensive. So as a project manager, I am always open for changes. That's my PM principle also. I am flexible. I am responding to system interaction. One of the PM principle out of 12 is talking about respond to system interactions all the time. But at the same time, I should do it in a consultation with the stakeholders. It should not happen that we directly jump to something and somebody gave us an input, and without informing other stakeholders, we listened to a one stakeholder input only, and we started doing scope change, scope change, scope change. That is scope creep. So we can say scope creep is something is an uncontrolled expansion of scope, uncontrolled, but controlled expansions can definitely happen. And that is not at all a scope creep. That should be something we should be doing all the time. Yeah. So we can say so. And we have a question. So we should be having one use solution case for each WBS work, right? Possible. Yeah, that's a possible. In your context, you may create a use case or a document for each particular WBS. And from a generic project management language, they will call it WBS Dictionary. So in a simple word, you have divided the whole requirement into small pieces, and each piece is elaborated. So we call it WBS Dictionary. Okay, so that was the one content, we can say so. So done with scope creep. And then there is something called gold plating. Sometimes we also believe if we keep doing gold plating, that is also not a good idea. And in Agile, we do gold plating, something like that. So say, be it Agile or be it non-Agile, we should make sure that we work with stakeholders and then do some change in the scope. Now, the scope creep, the trigger was coming from stakeholders and we were reaching to uncontrolled expansion. In a gold plating, the trigger is coming from the team. So team thought it's a great idea and they implemented the great idea without informing to the stakeholders. Now, does it mean the team should not think about anything else and they should just focusing on what is written in the scope? The answer is no. Team should think creatively. Team should bring new ideas, but first on the table, first do an impact analysis of it, involve right stakeholders, and then do it. If you are not doing it, you may want to give a surprise to your stakeholders. That may not be a good surprise. Yeah, may not be. And that is something not expected in the project. And we can say doing that is called gold plating. Don't do it, because your stakeholder may not like your surprises. Yeah, so that's another two area which are related to here. So we got it. Yeah, so Rohit, it's the same. Yeah, so as I explained, you can say you can use a word use case there, but in a PMBOK language, in a project management language, they will not use any other language. They will just call it WBS Dictionary. So say if I am in a software word, I will call it module specification, I may call it solution specification, I may call it use case, depending upon the terminology used in my company. In my construction business, I may use some different terminology, but from a PMP project management generic terminology perspective, any further double click on WBS element. So you can say I click a double click and I get a little document which explain it. We call it WBS Dictionary. So that's the word we use. That's the word. Yeah, but yes, yeah. So for a change in scope, is it PM who does the impact analysis of the change on schedule, cost, and other areas? So say, really, it depends upon the overall organization structure. If you are a matrix organization, if you are a projectized organization, things may be different. Yeah. And you may have a weak matrix, strong matrix, that all plays a role. But generally, if the question coming in the PMP exam and not much details are given, then definitely I assume project manager should be leading the effort. So I should make sure that I involve right people to bring the impact analysis of a proposed change, so that my stakeholder can do evaluation of the change, they can do a cost benefit of the change in the holistic manner. Now, do I have those skills to do it myself? Probably yes, then you do it if the question indicates that. If you don't have it in a practical word, then you may need to involve some subject matter experts. Usually you do first level of impact analysis yourself to identify, is it really a big thing? And once you realize that this is something required special analysis, you will add the subject matter experts. You will ask them to provide their impact analysis soon, because you need to compile all this information and propose it to the stakeholders. So mostly you will do it. If you are following matrix organization, then those experts could be functional head also, because they understand each function tower in a little bit far more better than you. So they may do a little bit detailed analysis there. Yeah. So, but I get it done. I just can't say that if the impact analysis is not presented to a stakeholder, it's not my problem. It is my problem, but we need to find out the appropriate people to see this whole thing. I need to ensure that we are doing integrated impact analysis. If the stakeholders or subject matter expert is only talking about costing, I need to look at a risk also. I need to look at a timeline also. So I need to make sure the overall integration of impact analysis is performed. And I might do that job myself. Yeah. So I may collect impact analysis from different people, but then I will drive, or I might do myself the integrated impact analysis of the overall change. And that will be presented to my senior stakeholders. You can call it change control board for approval of that particular change if it goes beyond a threshold level as per my change control plan. Yeah. Good. So this is about overall working with the scope. Yeah, I think we are approaching towards our final 10 minutes. So if you have any specific queries, please bring it on here. So for the scope, what would be the work performance report? Yeah, first thing is you don't worry about that much about work performance report as a word. Yeah, in a new PMP, they are not coming. Yeah. So in our old PMP word, we used to have a information like work performance data, work performance information, and then work performance report. So work performance report is expected to be integrated. That may not rely only on scope. The work performance data and work performance information may come from respective areas. So something like you can say so. Now, what kind of data may come? Which WBS has been done? Which WBS has been delayed? Which WBS is requiring change? So you may have a WBS informations coming, yeah, and that may becomes your variance analysis also, where we are expecting deviations and where we have a as it is scope happening. So that could be one information which may go to integrated scope, integrated work performance report, talking about which all WBSs are getting impacted because of the change, which WBS are going as per the initial plan. There could be information related to completion and acceptance of the WBSs also. So we may say that out of 5 deliverables, few deliverables has been validated. Now, few deliverable has been done, that could be a project scheduling information, but validated is something, a project scope information. So when I'm presenting my project's report to my stakeholders, from a scope perspective, my stakeholders might be interested in knowing, is there any change in the agreed upon scope baseline that may get reflected in my report? My stakeholder might be interested in knowing, is there any completion of the WBS which has been already accepted by the stakeholder? So if we have an acceptance done, validation done, that might also be presented in my work performance report as a project report. And there could be a status of change requests also, which might get accumulated, and we may have a recommendation to show there. So these are the kind of scope related topics which may come in your work performance report. Though whenever you talk about scheduling, costing, indirectly it is all rooted on the scope, but these are the one which may specifically come from your scope related topics. Okay, so that's what we can see here. Great. So if all things are settling down, then probably we can think about closing this session for today. If anyone has a query, please let me know here. Okay, so I think this is a good place to close. As I was talking in the beginning, we are starting one focused programs where we will be running small sessions of 3.5 hour duration. But these 3.5 duration will be focused on a one particular topic where we explore it, study it in the closed loop session, not in a live format like this, in a Zoom format. And we can have interaction, and probably that can generate a good amount of learning for you. If you are interested in knowing those kind of session details, you can visit our website or drop us a message. Usually we will run it in the Indian timing, morning 6 a.m. Onwards, and we do have a schedule. I think the first session is starting somewhere on 24th June, where we are 25th June for India, 25th June. In US it will be evening, 8 p.m. of the previous day. And initial 4 sessions we are designing for Agile. So we have created Agile for project management, user stories, estimation, and matrices. These are separate topics, 3.5 hours each. Then we have a project scope management topic, the way we did today, but more detailed with the help of examples and documents. That's something we'll do. And then as of now, I have planned a project risk management topic as well. So these are, I call it focused sessions, which helps you to learn a bite size rather than learning the whole PMP in a one go. Especially designed for those individuals who are still thinking of starting the PMP journey or not starting, something like that. Or some of you who think that we have a decent understanding, but a particular topic we want to learn, then they can join those focused sessions. So if you are interested, please visit our website. In our project management menu, you can find these details or drop us a message. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. Yeah, see you sometime in the next session.